Hi guys! So we're here today to do my first book haul of 2019. Unbelievable, right? Well, you better believe it. But you know the drill, so without further ado, let's jump straight into the books. I didn't get a ton of books for Christmas, but I did get a few, so I will start off with those ones. The first one was from my wonderful friend Lauren over at Lauren Wade on BookTube, and that is Dragons, The Myths, Legends and Lore by Doug Niles. So this is a book that's title is pretty self-explanatory, but it is part of a series of lovely little hardback books exploring kind of the history and different versions of lore surrounding specific magical creatures. So there's a fairy one, a mermaid one, I think there's a vampire one, there's a dragon one, and there might be others, and it is just lovely. Dragons are my favourite magical creature. I love them. I love books involving dragons. I love dragon lore. Myself, when I write fantasy, there is often dragons at play, and it explores it in say like different cultures, so East Asia, South Asia, European, antiquity, other areas. It then looks at dragons in films, in games, in popular fiction, and I just think this is going to be absolutely fantastic. I cannot wait to read it. I was then given a beast of a book by my boyfriend, and that is Footnotes on Gaza by Jo Sacco, who is the author of Palestine, which is also, like this book here, a graphic novel. So this is a chunky graphic novel, but a graphic novel nonetheless. So this is what it looks like inside. Oh, I'm trying to take care of it because it's such a gorgeous big hardback book. I don't want to damage it, but this is what it looks like inside. Jo Sacco is a journalist, but obviously he also is an artist, and he explores some of the topics that he has looked into via this art form. Basically, it's a war report in the form of a graphic novel, and I think his work is absolutely fabulous, and was really interested in reading this anyway, so it was a very, very thoughtful gift, and I will definitely be getting to this one soon. I then got a few books from my mum. My mum and I didn't actually really do Christmas this year. When I say she gave me these books, she gave them to me unwrapped days before Christmas because we didn't actually do Christmas, but I did buy her a couple of things, and she obviously picked me up a couple of things just because we love each other and we like giving each other gifts. So those included Ghosts in Enlightenment Scotland. This is a non-fiction book by Martha McGill, which just looks absolutely brilliant. I'd never heard of this. It's new out actually this year, and I was so pleased that my mum picked this up for me. The back reads, medieval Scots told stories of restless souls and walking corpses, but after the 1560 Reformation, witches and demons became the focal point for explorations of the supernatural. Ghosts re-emerged in scholarly discussion in the late 17th century, often in the guise of religious propagandists. As time went on, physicians increasingly reframed ghosts as the conjurations of disturbed minds, but Gothic and Romantic literature revelled in the emotive power of the returning dead. They were placed against a backdrop of ancient monasteries, castles and mouldering ruins. And authors such as Robert Burns, James Hogg and Walter Scott drew on the macabre to colour their depictions of Scottish life. Meanwhile, folk culture used apparitions to talk about morality and mortality. So this book focuses on the period from 1685 to 1830 and studies kind of the use of ghosts in literature around that time. So I think this looks brilliant, cannot wait. She then got me a book that I've actually already read, but I'm very pleased to have my own copy of, and that is Proper Propaganda by Benjamin Zephaniah. She spotted this in his charity shop and knows that I love Benjamin Zephaniah, as does she, and wasn't sure if I'd read it or not, or had it or not, but I don't have it even though I've read it, so I'm very glad to have a copy, and it is just a collection of his poetry, which I love. The last book was then sort of intended to kind of be, from my mum's words, what she said was that she wanted to kind of pick me up the kind of book my dad would have picked me. So my dad was such an amazing bargain hunter slash like book sleuth when it came to charity shops and second-hand bookshops, and he could always find something fantastic, and he always ended up getting me some second-hand books for Christmas. And my mum was in a second-hand bookshop and decided to pick me something she thought he might have picked me. So she picked me up this lovely little leather-bound edition of Robert Louis Stevenson's Virginibus Purisque, but I've never heard of this, so I don't actually know what this is about. It's not a Robert Louis Stevenson that I've come across before, but Robert Louis Stevenson is a classic, famous Scottish author. He wrote Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, he wrote Treasure Island, to name a few that you might have heard of. So this was a very special little gift from her. But moving on from Christmas gifts, I then have some books I picked myself up. 3 of which I picked up new and 2 of which I picked up second hand. So the ones I picked up new include Priestess of the White by Trudy Canavan. I picked this up when I went and had a wee look in the bookshops with my friend Jill after Christmas in Edinburgh, and I have been meaning to read some Trudy Canavan for ages, but particularly of late when I've really began to reappreciate my sort of big epic fantasy world, and Trudy Canavan is just one of those authors, especially when it comes to female-led fantasy, that is always on the lists of like best authors to check out. Her books are always coming up, being recommended, so I wanted to pick up something by her and thought the plot of this one sounded particularly interesting. So this is about a female sorceress who has been chosen as like one of the sort of like higher up people in her sort of religious order, and her people are under threat from some black magicians that are coming to attack them, I guess, but she hasn't had a lot of training, so she's kind of been flung in at the deep end. More than anything though, like I said, I just really want to read something by this author, so I'm excited to have one on my shelf. I then picked myself up 2 new books, but they were half price in the Verso December sale. So Verso is a publisher that I love. They publish loads and loads of amazing non-fiction as well as a little bit of fiction and other stuff, but every December they have 50% off all of their books on their website, so I treated myself to 2. I did have to narrow it down. There was many that I wanted, but you know, you gotta take care of those purse strings. So these were the 2 I picked, and the first one is Conversations with Allende, Socialism in Chile by Regis Debray. So this is Salvador Allende, who is in fact Isabel Allende's father, who is quite a famous South American magical realism author, and her father was actually president of Chile until he was assassinated under a coup. And I have been particularly interested recently in learning more about Chile and Allende and his assassination after I saw a film called Ne Pasarán. Well, it's a documentary, which was amazing, and it was all about the coup, so I will recommend that to you, but I would like to learn more, and I thought it would be interesting to read actual interviews with Allende himself and his politics and when he was a president. Obviously this isn't going to specifically deal with the coup because Allende had passed away after that, he'd been murdered, but it does have an introduction, so I'm sure it'll give me some like interesting background. And we then have The Legacy of Rosa Luxemburg by Norman Jerris, and this is basically a biography of Rosa Luxemburg, which is something I've wanted to read for a while. And sort of have been looking for the one that I wanted to start with when it came to biographies of her, because she's a figure who I found very, very interesting, and I've read some of her actual non-fiction work before and very much enjoyed it. So this one just sounded like it was written in a way and with a focus that I would enjoy. I believe it's meant to really tackle some of the assumptions that have been made about her and where they are wrong and kind of where she sat in politics of her day, so looking forward to this one. And then the 2 books I picked up second hand include A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. This is not a recent release, but I found a second-hand copy of it. It's something that's been sort of in the back of my mind to read for years, and I've never really gotten around to it, but it was recently adapted for the screen, and that sort of reminded me again of it, so I've been looking out for it, and when I saw it second-hand, I had to pick it up. I'm intrigued to see if I like it or not, but this one is set in a world full of witches and demons and vampires in the modern day, and I believe there's some sort of like political intrigue going on amongst their communities. The manuscript which holds the secrets of their past and the key to their future, and then there is a forbidden love at the heart of it all. So I'm intrigued to finally get around to this book, which is incredibly hyped up. And then I picked up another fancy book secondhand, and that is Fires of the Faithful by Naomi Kritzer. This I was particularly interested in because not only is this a classic mass market paperback high fantasy book, which I love, it has a queer romance at the centre. So our protagonist is a young woman and she falls in love with another young woman throughout the course of this novel, which is something I've been looking for in my fantasy. Our protagonist is a 16-year-old girl who is studying at a music conservatory, but outside of her home the sort of like kingdom is being ravaged, and there's lots of I guess like famine and poverty and danger, and I assume that her relationship comes into play at some point during the conflict of the novel, so looking forward to this. I then have a poetry collection that was actually given to me by a friend. It was passed on to me because she had 2 copies, and that is The Perseverance by Raymond Antrobus. Who do you think passed this on to me? Who always passes me on extra poetry books? It's Jen, of course. She is like my poetry queen. I can always go to her for recommendations, and she'd been sharing poems from this on Instagram, which I thought looked fantastic, and then she offered me a copy because she had 2, so I instantly said yes, of course. The author is British Jamaican, and the poems that Jen shared that made me interested were of course somehow political, because that's what I love from my poetry, but I also believe this explores themes of being deaf, as well as grief over a lost father, so I'm really keen to read this one soon. I then have some books that were sent to me by publishers. So those start off with a book I'm incredibly excited about. It was in my most anticipated releases of the year video, and that is, of course, The Wicked King by Holly Black. This is the sequel to The Cruel Prince, which I read last year. Very much enjoyed. It is a fae novel that very much focuses on the dark side of the fae. Our protagonist was taken away from her parents. Well, her parents were murdered by a fairy when she was a child, because her older sister is actually her half-sister, whose father is a member of the Fae court, and she and her twin and her older sister, who's half Fae, are taken away to be raised in the land of the Fae, and it's about her kind of trying to fit in a world that she doesn't necessarily belong in because she is a human, to sort of like escape the kind of wrath of and cruelty of the other Fae and protect herself and her family. It was so much fun, and I am so excited to see what happens next. We then have a book I've already read and loved, and that is The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. This is published by Bloomsbury Books, and oh my goodness, this is fantastic. I will link the videos I have reviewed this in down below, but just believe me, it is brilliant. It is a mystery novel with layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of mystery, and you cannot put it down. You cannot stop turning the pages. It is a mystery with a paranormal twist, however, because our protagonist, who is trying to solve this mystery, wakes up every morning in the body of a different guest at a party in a manor house in the sort of first half of the 1900s. At least that's kind of like the time period it suggests it's in. Not only does he not know who has murdered Evelyn Hardcastle, but he doesn't know why he is being made to solve this mystery in the bodies of different people, or who he really is. And it's so fascinating. Loved it. Another poetry collection, which in this instance was sent to me by the publishers, is How to Pull Apart the Earth by Carla Cordero. I love the cover of this one. I just think it's really like aesthetically pleasing. This sentence on the back though completely sold this poetry collection to me when the publisher asked me if I'd like a copy, so I'll read it to you, and it says, How to Pull Apart the Earth exemplifies the complexity and beauty of growing up in a borderland and the sacrifices paid for the dream. So I believe this poetry collection explores culture, discrimination, borders, and I read a couple of the poems in here and thought they were really beautifully written, so I'm excited to read the rest of it. Then 3 more books from publishers include The Loosening Skin by Elia Whiteley. This is an author I have read 2 of her novels or novellas of before, as well as some of her short stories, and they are the creepiest things. I have had nightmares because of Elia Whiteley's books, but they are so beautifully written. She has such a gorgeous way with words, and they're meant to be kind of unnerving. So they are fulfilling their purpose. They make you think, even if they do then seep into your dreams. But this is her latest novel, published by Unsung Stories, and of course I said yes because I've loved her other books, even if, again, like I said, they somewhat terrified me, and this one sounds no less terrifying. It's about a world like our own, except in which every 7 years people shed their skins, and when they shed their skins they sort of lose all their ties to other people, so they don't possess the same like feelings or love that they had for those around them, and it's almost like they're starting afresh every 7 years. Some rich people, however, are able to pay to keep their skins, I believe, so that they don't have to change as radically and can keep their old lives. There is a superstar singer, I believe though, that has had one of his skins stolen, and our protagonist, this young woman on the front, who sheds more regularly than 7 years, I believe, has to help him find his stolen skin. It sounds so weird and intriguing, and I can't wait to read it. I then have a non-fiction book by another author who I'm a big fan of, and that is Displaced: My Journey and Stories from Refugee Girls Around the World by Malala Yousafzai. So I Am Malala was a very popular book when it came out, and I read it. It was brilliant. Honestly, one of the best non-fiction books I've read, so accessible, would highly recommend it to everyone. And this book is Malala's latest endeavour, and it collects together her own story as a refugee alongside the experiences of lots of other girls' experiences as refugees and how they differ and how they are similar, and kind of brings them all together in this collected volume. And I think this is going to be so heart-wrenching but incredibly important, and a conversation that it really needs to keep going. And it disturbs me at how much migrants and refugees are being dehumanised in the media at the moment, so I hope more people pick this up. And lastly, I have The Lonely People by David Owen, another author who I very much enjoy. I read another one of his young adult books, The Fallen Children, which was a retelling of John Wyndham's Midwich Cuckoos, and it's one of the best young adult novels I've ever read. So when he had a new book coming out, of course I requested a copy from the publisher. I purely requested this on the basis of the author, but I can tell you what it's about from the blurb on the back, which says, "Everyone tells Kat that her online personality, confident, funny, opinionated, isn't her true self. Kat knows otherwise. The internet is her only way to cope with a bad day, chat with friends who get all her references, make someone laugh. But when she becomes the target of an alt-right trolling campaign, she feels she has no option but to escape, delete, disappear." All the Lonely People is a timely story about online culture that explores the experience of loneliness and in a connected world, and the power of kindness and empathy over hatred. This again sounds so relevant and so important, and from my experience of reading David Owen's young adult books in the past, he is so good at exploring the experiences of young people in contemporary Britain. So I'm really excited to read this one. But those are all the books that I have acquired so far this year. I know, right? Already quite a few, so I better get reading them. Well, I've read a few at least, so it's okay. I would love to hear your thoughts on any of these books if you have read or are interested in reading any of them. And do let me know what your first bookish purchase was of the new year, if you have, or what you borrowed from the library. I'd love to hear about it. But until next time, happy reading, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye guys!